Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to another Cube Tuesday. Today we're going to be talking about another cool card for Cube and that's Stoneforge Mystic. We're going to be going over what it does, why it's good, why you should run it and what to look out for and what kind of build arounds that it works with, all that good stuff. So, firstly, Stoneforge Mystic is 1 and a white for a 1/2 creature core artificer. It has, when Stoneforge Mystic enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. It also has, pay 1 and a white and tap it, and you may put an equipment card from your hand onto the battlefield. So, what is it good for and what does it do? So firstly, Stoneforge Mystic is a very, very powerful card. It was pre-banned in Modern for years until it actually got unbanned in 2019. Obviously, Modern's a format where you can have multiples. Cube is a format where you can only have one of everything. You can only have one Stoneforge Mystic, and you can only have one of your cheat into play big equipment targets. Even with that said, it is a super, super strong card. You get card advantage by being able to tutor up the best equipment from your deck and put it into your hand, and you get to cheat on mana by paying 1 and a white and tapping it and just putting it straight into play. This gets exceptional when you combine it with equipment that are also creatures, things with like living weapon, so you have your Batterskulls and your Cauldron complete. Being able to cheat one of these into play on turn 3 is nothing to be sniffed at, it is really, really strong. And while those are probably the best thing to cheat into play because you don't actually have to equip them to anything, they just come down and it's effectively a creature, things like Umezawa's Jitte will still win a game of Magic in 2023. So next up, what kind of deck does it go into? So I've personally seen this be best in like a blue-whitey, control-y tempo style of deck. Something that wants to kind of control the game and then use this to slam down your big threat to win the game. Because that tap ability can be activated at instant speed, it means that you can protect your Stoneforge Mystic until the coast is clear, until the end of your opponent's turn, put something big into play so you're ready to swing through on the next turn. Also, in those blue-white builds, I have seen a lot of artifact decks kind of crop up in that colour combination, even though it's not something I'm strictly supporting. But this goes really nicely in a deck with like a Chrome Mox and especially a Tinker. The other place I like Stoneforge Mystic is in a Borisy mid-range kind of deck. Not a full-on Boris aggro deck, kind of a Boris deck running an Ancient Tomb and things like that, so you could feasibly cast the Batterskull as well if you needed to. The kind of decks that are also going to want to run like initiative creatures, things like that. In those decks, I think this is super strong. Also, Stoneforge is just going to get better as time goes on, as they keep printing more and more dumb, busted equipments for us to play with. Especially as we see more and more equipments that come into play as creatures. We already had Living Weapon as a mechanic, but in Kamigawa last year we also got Reconfigure. Imagine a Modern Horizons power level Reconfigure card. That's going to be really, really dumb. Batterskull got an upgrade to Cauldron complete. What are we going to get with a Reconfigure card? That's going to be really cool. When that gets printed, Stoneforge Mystic will absolutely love it. So next up, when should you actually draft it? I kind of take this card actually quite highly if I see it. Especially if I've already got some kind of white mid-rangey kind of cards, if I've got like a Path to Exile or a Wrath of God, something like that. There will be some lower power level cubes where this will be one of the best cards that you can take early. In more powerful cubes, like kind of like Modern power level, Legacy power level, Vintage power level, I don't think this is a card you want to be taking pack 1, pick 1. If you see this card like pick 5 to 8 in pack 1, then it's a good sign that your strategy is open and you can move into it. One of the reasons you want to be sure that this strategy is open a little bit is because you need to pick up another card to go with Stoneforge Mystic. Stoneforge Mystic does nothing without an equipment for you to actually go and get. You want to be making sure that if there is a Batterskull or a Cauldron complete that's open, that it's going to come round to you. And what's nice is outside of a Stoneforge deck, those kind of big dumb equipments are only going to go into an artifact deck, but there's other options for them to go and get. They can pick a Wormcoil engine, for example. There is also fairer versions of a Stoneforge deck, which runs things like the Sword of X and Y. But in general, I'm becoming less and less of a fan of those cards as time goes on. There's just better things you can be doing with your mana. So I guess next up is how does it play? So it kind of depends on what you're going to be getting with the Stoneforge in terms of how it actually plays. If you're drawing it early and you're turn 3ing a Batterskull or a Cauldron complete, it's very, very strong. Those can attack themselves. If you're planning on getting something like a Jitte or a Sword of X and Y, you generally want an evasive creature already in play that you can equip that thing to immediately. But if you don't have another creature, Stoneforge Mystic is one, so it can always get in as well if needed. Also worth mentioning, Stoneforge has some nice tech with Batterskull, because Batterskull has the ability to pay 3 to return it to your hand. You can do this if it ever gets targeted with a removal spell or something like that. You can pay to bring it back to your hand and then cheat it back into play with the Stoneforge, ready for it to rumble in again. In terms of alternatives, there aren't too many good ones. It's kind of like they learnt their mistake with Stoneforge Mystic and have printed fairer ones since then. The closest comparison is probably Stonehewer Giant, but that is 5 mana. There are much poorer imitations. I'm looking at you, Relic Seeker. You are not a good card. Do not play this in your cube. I tested it. It's not very good. Which is why, if I'm completely honest, the best alternatives to Stoneforge Mystic is something like Tinker, which lets you cheat artifacts into play. Or I guess actually Something like Goblin Welder as well, which also lets you cheat artifacts into play, this time from your graveyard. Maybe that's why I'm seeing Stoneforge played in white, blue, and white, red decks most of the time. So lastly, what level of cube can Stoneforge go into? I personally think it has a place in a lot of cubes. Like with a lot of good cards, it gets better depending on what is around it. If you have Batterskull and Cauldron Complete in your cube already, then Stoneforge Mystic will naturally be better than a cube without them. But even in those cubes, the power level is checked by the fact that it's effectively a 2-card combo. You need to get your Stoneforge Mystic and your big dumb equipment to do the really dumb broken things. If you don't get the big dumb broken things, it is more of just a really good value card at that point. Unfortunately, the price means it's not going to be seeing a lot of play in more budget style of cubes. But power level wise, I think it would be fine in there, especially if the things you are getting from the deck are like reconfigure creatures. At that point, it is just a good power level. Basically from there upwards, in any non-rarity restricted cube, I think Stoneforge Mystic has a place. I'm saying that because it is a cool card that can lead to a whole strategy just by itself. It can give your more vanilla blue-white tempo-y control deck something cool, something busted that it can do out of nowhere. And that for me is exciting. That's why I like running it in cube. But thank you very much for watching, everyone. Do let me know down in the comments your favourite interactions that you've had with Stoneforge, or if there's any cooler and interesting lines that you don't think I've covered. Would love to see them. But until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.